Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles has many recurring themes across the franchise, one of which being self-acceptance and finding a sense of community with other outcasts. This messaging is resonant for a lot of marginalized minority groups, including the LGBTQ+ community. Unfortunately, despite this resonance, there's an embarrassingly minimal number of queer characters represented by this franchise. Hey there, I'm Torisaur, and in celebration of Pride Month, we are going to be taking a look at all of the LGBTQ+ characters across the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise. Because the number of canonically queer TMNT characters is so limited, I am going to be breaking this video into 3 sections: canon, semi-canon, and headcanon. Canon refers to any characters that have been explicitly shown to be queer in the text. Semi-canon is a weird little category where the characters haven't been confirmed as queer within the media itself, but there are definitely intentional implications there. And headcanon is purely my own interpretation of certain characters as queer in one way or another, based on pretty arbitrary details, likely not intended to be interpreted as such, but they still resonate with me. Sometimes this is as simple as liking a ship, and because the 2 characters in the ship are both male or both female, it is an inherently queer headcanon. I've also drawn fan art of several of the characters and ships we'll be discussing today, so I'll sprinkle those throughout this video wherever applicable. But with that, let's first talk about all of the canonically LGBTQ+ characters in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise. The TMNT wiki has 20 characters listed on the LGBT characters page, which when contextualized in a 40-plus-year-old franchise with hundreds of characters is already very little, but if you actually look at which characters are listed here, you realize that nearly half aren't even Ninja Turtles characters. There are a lot of crossovers between TMNT and other IPs, and so a lot of those listed on the wiki are queer characters from those franchises. This includes Will Byers from Stranger Things, Cerebus from the 1977 comic of the same name, Vampirella from the 1969 comic of the same name, Tim Drake, Poison Ivy, and Harley Quinn from the Batman TMNT comic crossovers, and Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn are each listed a second time due to the Ninja Turtles' appearance in Injustice 2. This means 40% of the listed LGBT TMNT characters don't even belong to the franchise, and an additional listing of Jennika from an alternate future brings our total queer character count down to 11. Now, 2 of those 11 characters are technically canon, but I think they fall a bit more into the semi-canon category, because them being canon was only vaguely confirmed on social media after the show ended, and they're only implied in the series itself. You could watch the show and not see them as a couple, so even if they are canon, it's not in the same way these other characters are. And so our final total of canonically queer Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles characters is 9, all of which come from comic adaptations. The earliest confirmed queer characters in the TMNT franchise are 2 minor characters from the original Mirage continuity in the early 2000s. In February of 2006, Volume 4 Issue 26 introduced Soowiiksa, later accidentally renamed to Erachik, a warrior in the Battle Nexus. In issue 32 from 2014, she parts way with Leonardo and a few others, mentioning that her wives are waiting for her and wondering if she will see Leonardo at the games. What I never realized until researching for this video was that Volume 4 of Mirage never saw a conclusion. Presumably if we had gotten more of this plotline, we would have seen more of Soowiiksa/Erachik's story, but this issue was actually the last issue of the Mirage continuity to have been released. The series had already been on a 1-issue per year schedule, and with issue 31 coming out in 2010, it wasn't until 2014 that this final issue 32 released. The to be continued at the end of the issue actually has a little note that says hopefully sooner than 5 years from now, 12 years later, and we still don't have an end to the storyline. As far as representation goes, Soowiiksa/Erachik is a forgettable character with 2 different names from an abandoned storyline that offhand mentions having wives. It is nice to see casual representation of not just lesbian relationships but polyamory, so I'll give it that. But again, it is an offhand comment from a character that has had no lasting impact on the TMNT franchise nor its fandom. In August of 2007, the Tales of the TMNT anthology series gave us an issue called Casey in Point, in which Casey saves a man named Jim from a gang and, over a drink, tells a story about his made-up late brother, Davy Jones. The extent of Jim's queerness is a single panel in which the street punks targeting him say, "We don't take kindly to people like you," and then call him the F-slur. There is obviously some implication there that they're going to beat up Jim because he's gay, but when the extent of the queer representation is being called a slur, That's not particularly strong representation, but I do appreciate Casey standing on business against homophobic behavior, so there is at least some positivity in terms of supporting queerness here. Also, I gotta take these sunglasses off because they are killing me. The remaining 7 of the canonically queer TMNT characters all come from the IDW comic continuity. I'm gonna start by discussing the more minor representation, and then end by talking about the most substantial queer representation we've gotten from this franchise through Lindsey, Jennika, and Sheena. There are 3 minor gay male characters that we are introduced at the beginning of the Mutant Town arc starting in issue 101. If you're unfamiliar with the IDW comic storyline, at the end of the last major arc, a mutant cat called Old Hob set off a mutagen bomb that mutated a significant number of New Yorkers into mutants, and the Mutant Town arc follows the socio-political fallout from that event. Bandit and Puggle are enforcers for Hobbs mutanimals who have taken control over Mutant Town in the chaos of mutants springing up out of nowhere. They serve as a means of introducing us to the state of Mutant Town, as well as Mona Lisa through trying to steal her food. We run into them again at the Kennel Club a few issues later, where Bandit yells at Jennika for breaking his boyfriend's bill. We occasionally see them in future issues doing their jobs as Hobbs enforcers, but they're not particularly relevant characters. We also meet Jay, a poison dart frog who mentions in a support group that his mutation led him to be cut off by those he thought loved him, including his mom, aunt, and boyfriend. Later, in the Battle of the Bands arc, which is kind of random but so much fun, Jay joins Jennika's band called Created in Darkness as a keyboardist. Jay is another example of very subtle, minor queer representation, which absolutely still has value, but at this point we've discussed more than half of the canonically queer characters in the franchise, none of which have been represented as queer outside of a single line of dialogue. The first substantial queer representation in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comes from Lindsey Baker and her crazy ex-girlfriend Jillian Amante. Lindsey is introduced in the very first issue of the IDW comic continuity, working alongside April O'Neil at StockGen. She later becomes relevant when Old Hob kidnaps her in order to use her knowledge of mutation to create new mutants for his army, which includes Herman the Hermit Crab, Mondo Gecko, and Pigeon Pete. Initially, Lindsey is more of a hostage than a member of the Mutanimals, but over time she finds a sense of belonging with this menagerie of mutants and becomes truly part of their little found family. In the Mutanimal series, Lindsey and Pigeon Pete are kidnapped by the Null Group, where Lindsey's ex-girlfriend Jillian Amante offers her a job with Null to help develop their own mutants. If Lindsey had a nickel for every time she was kidnapped for a job, she would have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it's concerning that it happened twice, right? Jillian tries desperately to get Lindsey to agree to work with her, and Lindsey very earnestly rejects her proposition. Through the Mutanimal story, we not only get insight into Lindsey's queerness, but the way in which Lindsey has found this family and sense of belonging with the Mutanimals. Recently, Lindsey's story has taken a bit of a tragic turn, where her experiments with studying localized physical mutation, mutating only one portion of the body, goes horribly wrong. Using herself as the primary test subject, she accidentally mutates into an uncontrollably hungry mutant spider. When Hob finds her, she explains the motivation behind mutating herself in the first place. All my life I've been an outsider, an outcast. At home, at school, at work, in my love life, I never fit in. Then you brought me into the Mutanimals and I started to think I had a chance to finally be on the inside for once. That if I was more like you guys, a mutant, I could actually fit in somewhere. I really appreciate the way this outsider narrative ties into both Lindsey's queerness and the relationship she's forged with the Mutanimals. Found family is such a major aspect of many queer individuals' experiences, and that being a part of Lindsey's journey gives her role as queer representation a lot more substance than an offhand comment or one ex-girlfriend. As far as Jillian is concerned, she only really serves as representation through Lindsey, but even then, she feels like a more fleshed out character than any of the other queer characters we've discussed thus far. In general, I would consider Lindsey Baker the first queer character in this franchise that feels like substantial representation. She has a great story that relates to her experience with being queer, while also playing a significant role in the main story unrelated to that experience. I also generally adore the Mutanimals, and Lindsey's involvement contributes to that enjoyment. The final instance of canon LGBT representation in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise are Jennika and her girlfriend Sheena Murphey. These two are the flagship queer relationship in TMNT. If you are aware of only one gay character in this franchise, it is probably Jennika. Like with Lindsey, Jennika's involvement in the story comes long before we learn about her queerness. We meet Jennika at the beginning of the second major story arc of the series, starting at issue 51. At this point in the series, Splinter has taken over the Foot Clan in the wake of the Shredder's death, and Jennika is an assassin that serves as his right hand. Because Jennika now finds herself involved with the Turtles as an ally, she starts forging connections with some of their allies, including starting to go out with Casey Jones. I do find the relationship to be kind of cute, though I was never particularly invested in it. With Jennika now being the Chunin of the Foot, a role that Karai had when her grandfather led the clan, Karai has major beef with Jennika that leads her to brutally stab her in the gut. Because the mutagen that mutated Splinter and the Turtles was an early version of a miracle medicine, Jennika receives a blood transfusion from Leonardo in order to save her, which has the side effect of mutating her into a turtle as well. Jennika's mutation takes us into the Mutant Town arc, in which Jennika forges a more personal relationship with the Turtles as their self-proclaimed Bad Apple Big Sister. And in this Mutant Town arc, Jennika meets Sheena Murphey. Sheena was one of the many victims of Hobbs' mutagen bomb and turned into a mutant pig. Despite this, she still finds joy performing at the Kennel Club as the lead singer of her band after the bomb. It's at one of her performances that Jennika meets Sheena, and after the show they get to chatting where Jennika offers to buy her a drink. From this point, Jennika and Sheena start casually dating. When Sheena first kisses Jennika, Jenny freaks out a little bit because it takes her back to the last woman she was with that she deeply loved but was tragically killed. I was kind of bothered by this plot point for a long time, because my thinking was that why does Jennika kissing another woman have to be tied to some tragedy from her past? Let a girl be sapphic in peace. But at the same time, we've known that Jennika has a troubled past and an extremely difficult life, with her rough family situation, life in prison, and becoming an assassin for the Foot. And so for her to have this major experience with her sexuality so tied to trauma, I guess it makes sense that there would be some struggle when it comes to her relationship with Sheena. And after Jennika has the conversation with Sheena explaining her freak out, they're able to move forward with their relationship and become official girlfriends. They are adorable. Something I very much appreciate about Sheena specifically is she doesn't feel like just Jennika's girlfriend. With Jennika being a main character, she's obviously going to get much more focus than Sheena, and the primary reason Sheena is featured as much as she is because she is Jennika's girlfriend. However, Sheena still very much feels like her own person and is highlighted in a few interesting ways outside of that relationship. There's a storyline surrounding Sheena's insecurity with her mutation, specifically that she used to have hair that she loved and now she's bald, and so she seeks out a hair transplant from a man named Dr. Barlow, who turns out to be a freaky mad scientist that experiments with mutants and sews them together, including turning one of the punk frogs named Bonnie into a turtle called Venus. So yeah, not a great guy. Recently, Sheena got to tour with her band after the bomb, which was a great opportunity for her. Another thing I really appreciate about Jennika and Sheena's relationships is we see a lot of ups and downs with it. It isn't just sunshine and rainbows all the time, and there is genuine conflict there, like Jennika being unable to join Sheena on the tour because of her Night Watcher duties. Overall, I think Jennika and Sheena are by far the best queer representation we have gotten from this franchise. Their relationship is frequently showcased in a very real way that I very much appreciate. There are two more canonically queer characters I have yet to discuss, but like I mentioned earlier, they are considered canon by the slimmest of margins. They very much teeter on the edge between canon and semi-canon, and so I'm going to use them as a transition between the two categories. The only canonically queer characters in an on-screen adaptation of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are Warren Stone and Hypno-Potamus from Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Despite being considered canon, they were only confirmed as such via an emoji after the series' conclusion, as opposed to within the show itself. However, even without that confirmation, Warren and Hypno were very clearly intentionally implied as having some sort of relationship, which at the very least grants them the status of semi-canon. Warren Stone is a news anchor turned mutant worm who desperately misses the fame and attention that he lost in his mutation. Mesmeron was a magician who was also mutated by one of Baron Draxum's mosquitoes and turned into a magical mutant hippopotamus. These two are introduced separately in the same early season 1 episode Newsworthy, in which Warren Stone is trying to get revenge on the Turtles, who are in turn trying to track down the mutant hippo wreaking havoc on New York City. Warren and Hypno don't really interact much in this episode, other than both being involved in the final fight and Warren saving the Turtles from Hypno's spell. Warren and Hypno meet a few other times in future episodes like Stuck on You, The Evil League of Mutants, and Turtle Dagonite's The Ballad of Ratman, but once again there isn't any indication of a relationship between them, until we get to the episode Warren and Hypno Sitting in a Tree. The episode title already has implications behind it, with it being reminiscent of the playground chant, Warren and Hypno Sitting in a Tree, KISSING. But the episode itself has additional implications that there's probably something else going on between the two of them. At the start of the episode, we learn that they are roommates and genuinely enjoy living together. So of course we have the "and they were roommates" dynamic established immediately. Throughout the entire episode, we see the two of them being very physically affectionate and gazing longingly at each other in a way that does not feel even remotely platonic. April describes Hypno as Warren's
friend slash roomie slash it's complicated,
which has its own implication of there being more to that relationship. And of course, once Warren and Hypno are reunited, the latter kisses the former on the head. So looking at all of that that, there are clearly very intentional implications about Warren and Hypno's relationship. However, it's not enough to specifically be considered canon on its own. Despite the kiss at the end, the two of them are repeatedly referred to as friends throughout the episode, including immediately before Hypno kisses Warren.
Where's my roommate slash friend slash magical assistant? Oh, it's good to have you back, Ruby. Slash magical assistant slash friend.
So the implications of them having feelings for each other remain implications, where someone could dismiss the relationship as two close friends that are just very physically affectionate. But on the flip side, there is clear intentionality with those implications, which is why Warren and Hypno qualify as semi-canon. Though of course, as I said before, the two of them were later confirmed as queer on social media after the series' conclusion. In August of 2020, Russ Carney, one of the writers for Rise, stated in a Twitter Q&A, "Although I've normally said that we don't typically explore relationships in kids animation, I feel that Hypno and Warren are pretty coupley. I wouldn't consider coupley specific confirmation of them as a couple, but it does at least reference some of the intentionality with them being seen as such." However, on July 2nd, 2023, series co-creator Andy Suriano posted a frame of Warren and Hypno from Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles the movie on Instagram, captioned "Partners in Crime and Life" with the pride flag emoji. So yes, Warren and Hypno are canonically queer, being the first and only LGBT characters in a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film or series. Again, I opted to put them in the semi-canon category because that is how they are represented by the show, but they are canonically a couple, and that's a beautiful thing. While we're on the topic of Rise, the next semi-canonically queer character I want to discuss is Baron Draxum. Draxum is a Rise original character and the main antagonist of Season 1. He's also the Turtles' second dad. The Rise Turtles have the most unique origin story in which their mutation was no accident. Baron Draxum originally intended for the Turtles to be his super soldiers and mutated them using a skilled warrior's DNA. After seeing Lujitsu, aka Hamato Yoshi, aka Splinter, fighting in the Battle Nexus, Draxum decides that he would be the perfect man to father his children. I mean, whose DNA would make his super soldiers. And the way Draxum chooses Lujitsu as shown in the Evil League of Mutants not only looks gay as hell, but the song specifically calls out Lujitsu's tight abs.
He was the greatest champion, his abs that were done tight.
On top of this, Draxum's whole thing is that he hates humans, so for him to look at this human man with such awe and a twinkle in his eye and think to himself, wow, I would love to have kids with him. I'm sorry, that is not a straight thought process. That in and of itself I don't think would be enough to qualify Baron Draxum as semi-canon, because although from my perspective that shit is gay as hell, it's more headcanon than anything. However, the thing that pushes Draxum and in turn Splinter into semi-canon territory is the fact that they are deliberately referred to as the Turtles' two dads. Baron Draxum has his life force sucked out of him in the Season 1 finale, and we don't see him again until the Season 2 episode Repair in the Baron, in which Mikey has set Draxum up in an apartment and tries to help him integrate into human society. Mikey expresses to Raph that Draxum is
the one who created us, and that makes him family.
The episode Hidden Cities Most Wanted is all about Mikey wanting to spend a day with both Splinter and Draxum. Basically just divorced dads trying and failing to keep it together for their son, the episode. After an entire episode of fighting, we get this really sweet moment where Splinter and Draxum reconcile their differences, and it's one of my favorite scenes in the whole TMNT franchise.
I wouldn't change my life and what I have with my boys for anything. I never thought I would say this, but thank you for turning me into me.
And you're right. I'm sorry for, trying to turn you into a weapon and a bunch of other stuff.
My wish came true! I wish my two dads would get along.
Hidden Cities Most Wanted is my favorite Rise episode, and one of my favorite episodes in the TMNT franchise in general. It's so sweet. With Mikey specifically referring to Splinter and Draxum as his two dads, and again, the Turtles being both of their children, this episode has that underlying queer coding in the way that it frames Draxum and Splinter like a divorced couple. Also, after Splinter thanks Draxum for creating his family, you see Draxum blush a little bit, and that's so cute. The Rise finale also reflects growth in Splinter and Draxum's relationship as co-parents to the Turtles.
For the boys. For our boys.
The only other thing I want to call out is Draxum's robe colors resemble the gay man pride flag, so I'll just leave that there. In terms of the semi-canon category, Draxum and Splinter feel more queer-coded as opposed to Warren and Hypno, who are alluded to having some kind of romantic relationship, but that very deliberate coding in which Splinter and Draxum are co-parents, paired with the fact that Draxum specifically wanted Lujitsu to have his children, is why I opted to put at least Draxum in the semi-canon category. The last two semi-canon characters in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are Bebop and Rocksteady from the 2012 animated series. These two are the most unique versions of Bebop and Rocksteady in the way that we get acquainted with them significantly before their mutation, and the fact that they start off as begrudging allies before they become super close as we know Bebop and Rocksteady to be. Ivan Steranko first appears as an unnamed weapons dealer in the season 1 episode Enemy of My Enemy, but we are properly introduced to him by name alongside Master Thief Anton Zek in season 2's The Legend of the Kurokabuto, where Steranko hires Zek to steal the Shredder's helmet to add to his collection. Their initial relationship is definitely more of a business relationship, with some tension between them evidenced by the implication that Zek is responsible for Steranko losing his eye.
You shoot me in the eyeball. You got that cool new eye? Used to be just another arms dealer, but now it's like, ooh, check out the cool eyeball guy.
However, when next we see them at the start of season 3, the two of them are hiding from the Krang post-invasion and decide they would find Karai and trade her to the Shredder in exchange for safe escape from the city. Because of the Turtles' intervention, the criminals' failure leads to their mutation as punishment from the Shredder. After their mutation, Zek and Steranko, nicknamed Bebop and Rocksteady by Michelangelo, are very close. And over time, you start to see them become more and more physically affectionate. Especially when you get to seasons 4 and 5, there's a lot of hugging and hand-holding. These moments on their own could be dismissed as not necessarily romantic. However, there are a couple of moments that push Bopsteady out of headcanon and into this semi-canon category due to some pretty intentional romantic implications. The first moment that stands out to me is season 4 episode 21 Darkest Plight, in which Bebop shares his invisibility with Rocksteady by maintaining physical contact with him. When Casey reveals their position, they're seen holding hands and the two of them look back and forth between their hands and each other. The hand-holding is specifically acknowledged as this sort of awkward moment because it could be seen as romantic. Even intended as a joke, that awkwardness is intrinsically tied with being a romantic gesture. I've talked about Bebop and Rocksteady's relationship a few times in the past, and every time I get comments about, "It's just a joke, bro, guys joke about being gay all the time," which first of all isn't just a guy thing. I feel like most people jokingly flirt with their friends. But secondly, the main reason that making gay jokes is funny in the first place is because it stems from the idea that obviously we're not actually into each other. The basis of this assumption is of course that both parties are straight, but these jokes persist in queer spaces within friendships that are so strongly platonic. Flirtatious jokes can also be used to test the waters with a friend in both straight and queer relationships, because humor is being used as a sort of barrier from rejection. However, the hand-holding moment isn't even Bebop and Rocksteady intentionally acting gay as a joke. The joke is that it is awkward that they are perceived in a romantic context. Of course, the alternative as to why a moment like this is seen as a joke is the homophobic mentality that being gay itself is a joke, but in a weird backwards way, that mentality actually supports the idea of these characters being gay, because the entire joke is that they're gay. I also think genuine romance itself can be comedic when played as super extra, because the humor comes from how absurdly dramatic they are about their feelings for one another, which could apply to any romantic relationship regardless of whether it is a queer relationship or not. And this brings us to the second moment that pushes Bebop and Rocksteady into semi-canon territory, coming from the 3-part crossover with the 1987 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series. The entire crossover is basically just the gay supervillain special, as it focuses on 2012 Bebop and Rocksteady working for 1987 Shredder and Krang, who I will be talking about very soon. We see peak Bopsteady in this special, with them finding themselves in a similar and they were roommate situation as Warren and Hypno as they discuss finding a place to live.
You too picky with apartments, so we stuck in my warehouse.
We of course get more moments of physical affection between them, but the one that stands out the most is when Shredder officially welcomes them as real supervillains.
Yes, we made it, baby! We in like the Flynn!
Bebop and Rocksteady holding hands and gazing into each other's eyes like this in front of a heart background makes it abundantly clear that we're meant to see this moment as gay as hell. This also isn't the only time we've seen this specific heart background. It's been used in several other romantic moments throughout the series, including the love at first sight moment when Donnie first lays eyes on April. Shredder calling them partners is used in the business sense in universe, but it feels like a tongue-in-cheek nod to these implications as well.
You two have earned your place as partners.
Once again, I guess you could dismiss everything with Bebop and Rocksteady as just jokes, but even then those jokes are still gay, and so it solidly lands them in the semi-canon category for queer characters in the TMNT franchise. 2012 Bopsteady actually make for a beautiful transition into the headcanon section of this video, as their crossover with the 1987 series heavily features Shredder and Krang. I was this close to including 87 Shredder and Krang in the semi-canon section of this video for reasons I will explain shortly, but I realized there just wasn't enough substance for them to escape headcanon, and I had to recognize my own bias influencing my desire to consider them semi-canon because they are my favorite ship in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I've talked about Shredder and Krang before, pretty recently in my Shredder ranking from earlier this year, but the foundation of this pairing is that they are played like an old married couple. This dynamic was not only abundantly clear when watching the series, but James Avery, Shredder's primary voice actor, confirmed it in an interview.
Like he said, it was like we treated it like an old married couple, you know, because we were in this together.
That interview is the reason I considered calling them semi-canon, but I don't think it's enough to necessarily grant them that title. However, it does reflect a little bit of intentionality in the way they were portrayed that I find delightful. This also ties into the way the whole Technodrome gang feels like a dysfunctional family, where Shredder and Krang adopt a sort of parental role for Bebop and Rocksteady.
Krang, get up here. You two have got a lot of explaining to do.
A lot of the bickering we see between Shredder and Krang are very domestic arguments that add a layer of intimacy to their relationship.
And just how are you paying for all this?
I borrowed your Alien Express card. I never leave the Technodrome without it.
We're out of power.
Really? And I thought you'd just forgotten to pay the electric bill.
I told you not to use my shampoo. I have to order it special.
Krang uses whatever shampoo Krang desires.
I never realized how purple picks up the lavender in your eyes.
Oh, thank you, dear.
I have an even longer compilation of their bickering and banter in the Shredder video that I mentioned earlier, but there are also moments of genuine care between them that really make the ship work. The season 4 episode Shredder's Mom is, as you probably guessed, about Shredder's mother, who is a retired supervillain herself. The whole episode is her getting along so extremely well with Krang, and Shredder being all embarrassed by her is played in such a way that feels very much like a meeting the parents dynamic.
Shredder, who is this woman?
My mother.
Silly boy. Krang let them destroy a dummy antenna.
See, silly boy? You should listen to your mother.
It's a very charming and lighthearted episode that captures a lot of what I adore about this series. Another episode that stands out to me as having certain undertones is Shrika's revenge from season 6. Shrika is Krang's ex-partner and wants to get revenge on Krang because she's convinced that he stole her energy ring.
How dare that woman accuse me, the mighty Krang, ruler of Dimensionax, of stealing her dopey ring!
So you didn't do it?
Of course I did. I just don't like her accusing me of it.
So naturally, Krang gives Shredder his ex's ring to do with as he pleases.
Here, try it on for size.
A weapon that also makes a fashion statement. I like it.
I'm glad you approve.
And maybe it's because by the point I reached this episode, I was already firmly aboard the shipping Shredder and Krang train, but the fact that it's a ring specifically makes the whole thing feel like Krang gives his ex-wife's ring to his new partner Shredder. I don't know, I'm seeing some implications there that probably weren't intentional, but as a huge shipper of these two, it really stands out to me. There's one last moment I want to share that comes from the final season of the 1987 series. Shredder and Krang are no longer the primary antagonists by this point. They've been usurped by an alien called Lord Dreg. Dreg hooks all of the turtles plus Shredder and Krang up to these machines that drain their abilities and in turn life force, so Dreg can be made more powerful. Shredder is able to free himself and hide away as he waits for their captors to leave before freeing Krang and escaping with him. Throughout the entire series, Shredder and Krang argue and bicker and act like they hate each other, but they ultimately always stick together. Shredder could have easily left Krang to die here, but he goes out of his way to free him. But that's not all, because with Krang having his life force drained by Lord Dreg, Shredder brings Krang back to a stable condition by transferring some of his own life force to him. If that's not love, I don't know what is. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, the whole crossover with the 2012 series feels like the gay supervillain special, and I absolutely adore it. I think part of why this ship is so appealing to me is because of how weird it is. Like, that's an alien brain blob and a human man, which is inherently unhinged as fuck. But part of why I love interspecies ships like this, obviously with the caveat that both parties can equally communicate and consent as if they were both human, is it's such a great exercise in the idea of love is love. Queer romance is something that continues to be more positively represented in the modern day, but there is still so much hate and bigotry that it is a constant uphill battle. And so having the ship that is both literally queer and spiritually queer by being so unconventional, especially because this series is older and from a time when positive queer representation was so minimal, it just holds such an incredibly special place in my heart as a queer individual who has an unconventional perspective on romantic romantic relationships. For this headcanon section, I also want to include some of the specific labels and identities I see for these characters. So for Shredder and Krang, I see Saki as gay and Krang as bi because of Shrika, with both of them being asexual. The asexual label here is for 3 pretty arbitrary reasons. The first is that Shredder's color palette is the same as the asexual flag's colors. Color palettes usually aren't the only reason for a personal headcanon, but they very often shape my headcanons because they're a fun little tie-in. The second reason is that the pairing is a human man and an alien brain blob, and so them being asexual helps contextualize their relationship that may otherwise raise a lot of questions about how it works. I mean, hey, if they weren't asexual, they would absolutely figure something out, so I don't think it's really necessary for them to be ace to have a relationship. But the third and biggest reason I headcanon them as asexual is pure projection. 1987 Shredder is my favorite character in the franchise, 1987 Krang is my favorite version of Krang, and as I've mentioned several times already, this is my favorite ship in all media. And so being someone who is asexual but not aromantic, it means a lot to me to see characters in romantic relationships that don't necessarily have to be sexual to have meaning to them. In general, the more I like a character, the more likely I am to headcanon them as asexual, because it brings a little piece of me into the enjoyment of the character. And hey, that's the best part of representation and headcanon. It provides more opportunities for people to connect to the characters they love. My second favorite Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles ship also comes from the 1987 series, that of course being April O'Neil and Irma Langinstein. This is a classic best friends that have some other vibes going on with them. There's so much love between these two, including a lot of really sweet physical affection. There's also the occasional moment that makes you raise your eyebrows just a little bit, like Irma asking April about a double date, or her throwing a wedding bouquet and April being the one to catch it.
I'm onto something hot!
Find out if he wants to double date with the 2 of us. I guess this is as close as I'm ever gonna get to having a romantic dinner for 2.
Like they say, the course of true love never runs smoothly.
For context on that last one, it's the episode where a love potion makes 3 of the turtles fall in love with Irma, and she was being sent a bunch of anonymous gifts from her admirers, so she got a little ahead of herself and was so sure that she was about to find true love. When it comes to specific headcanons, April gives me lesbian energy, particularly because she doesn't have any love interests in the show. I mean, other than Bugman, but that feels pretty one-sided. There was also a brief time where I headcanoned Irma as a lesbian suffering from a crippling case of compulsory heterosexuality, but after a while I came to the understanding that comphet has its limits, and especially with Irma having genuine feelings for Howie, an individual that everyone finds obnoxious and annoying, there is no way Irma isn't also attracted to men. So I see Irma as bisexual, which is another headcanon supported by her color palette. April is a very underrated ship. Every once in a while I'll see some cute fan art of them, but it is very few and far between. For Pride Month in 2024, I did several pieces of fan art for a bunch of my queer headcanons, many of which you have already seen, and because I love Irma and April so much, I did an entire little video for their day.
Picture me this. We go back to your house, we tell your parents that we're running away together. They think we're lesbians. We're not, but we let them think it because it's funny. And then we run away to Portland together because that's where the lesbians are most accepted. And even though we're not, I don't know why that matters, but I like it.
Okay.
We get... Yes.
I'm cutting you off. Picture me this. We are lesbians.
Anyway, April is peak and deserves more love. A little honorable mention that I don't have particularly strong headcanon opinions on, but felt was at least worth mentioning, are Vernon Fenwick and Burne Thompson. They feel like they have some extremely closeted feelings towards one another. Like, Vernon is the bottomest bottom to ever bottom, which is very compatible with Burne being a very demanding and power-hungry boss. I don't know, I feel like there's some weird tension there that neither of them would ever act on because they're so convinced that they're the most manly, straight men around, but their vibes are telling me otherwise. What is arguably the weirdest queer TMNT ship I enjoy is between Baxter Stockman and the artificial intelligence from an alien spacecraft. The TMNT wiki calls him the pan-dimensional space computer, also known as Z, but I couldn't find from where the name Z originates. However, there isn't really a better name for him from the series, so for clarity, I'm just going to stick with Z. Z is introduced as a disembodied voice aboard a pan-dimensional spacecraft in the season 3 episode Bye Bye Fly, in which he helps Baxter Stockman fight the Turtles and Shredder. Still with Baxter, in season 4's Son of Return of the Fly 2, Z is plugged into a computer and makes himself a body out of energy. Z was almost entirely destroyed in the final battle, but Baxter was able to recover Z's circuit board, and the two of them got stuck between dimensions. And finally, in season 7's Revenge of the Fly, Z and Baxter take over the Technodrome together before being inevitably defeated. Despite only appearing in these 3 episodes, Z is nothing but supportive of Baxter, constantly encouraging him and telling him how amazing he is.
Baxter's my friend, and I like him. Baxter, you're a genius. Gosh,
You're so clever, Baxter. This building is now under the command of the greatest guy in the universe, Baxter Stockman.
They must all suffer as I've suffered.
It's good that you don't keep these feelings bottled up, Baxter. My buddy Baxter's going to get you.
Oh, shut up.
He's really the only person to ever be on Baxter's side, and their immediate partnership is exactly why I often refer to him as Baxter's computer boyfriend. Again, it's a really weird ship, but Baxter's a really weird guy, so pairing him with a space computer feels like the only correct course of action. My final headcanon for the 1987 series is Donatello as aromantic and asexual. It's actually generally very popular to headcanon different versions of Donatello as aro-ace, but I don't see it with any of the other versions. This is largely due to me shipping those versions with specific characters, but also since the vibes that lead to those headcanons are the same vibes that make them read as autistic. And while a lot of autistic individuals find themselves on the aromantic and or asexual spectrums, it can be a harmful stereotype that autistic individuals don't desire or experience love in that way. Because Donatello being autistic is also a headcanon, there's nothing wrong with seeing him as aro-ace, but I personally don't like it most of the time. However, 1987 Donatello is an exception because of specific details from the series itself. There are a few moments in which a woman makes some comment towards Donatello and he shows absolutely no interest.
Where you going, short, green, and handsome?
Excuse me, but we're in a hurry. See that stupendous dish?
Why, thank you, Donatello.
Not you, Irma. I was talking about that satellite dish.
Donatello is also the only of the Ninja Turtles to have no romantic interest in the show. Leonardo has Lotus Blossom, Raphael has Mona Lisa, and Michelangelo has Kala and Buffy. There's a common misconception that Irma is a love interest for Donatello, but that is simply not true. The only possible moment that comes close is the stupendous dish scene I just showed, but that has nothing to do with Donatello specifically, and more Irma just being desperate for male attention and validation. Speaking of Irma, actually, in the episode I mentioned earlier where 3 of the turtles are love potioned to fall in love with her, Donatello is the only one not affected by it. In universe, it's because he just didn't eat any of the pizza with the love potion in it, but from a narrative perspective, it's significant to the headcanon that he just doesn't fall in love like that. Moving on to the next set of queer headcanons, we are talking about the 2003 animated series. The most popular queer headcanons for 2003's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are Leonardo and Usagi. Miyamoto Usagi is an adaptation of the same character from the comic Usagi Yojimbo, which is crossed over with several versions of TMNT, both directly in comic form and through original adaptations of the comic for the sake of crossing over with TMNT's animated shows. Although Usagi is an adult in the comics, 2003 Usagi is imagined as around the turtles' age, and his relationship with Leonardo is particularly strong. Both of them happily help each other out when their respective worlds are in danger.
Leonardo-san, your family needs you. I cannot ask you to—
Of course I will help you, Usagi. What are friends for? I can't ask you to come with me, Usagi.
You do not have to ask, my brother. I am going with you. As you say, what are friends for?
They gift each other swords for Christmas in a very sweet moment.
I got you something.
A sword? Wicked! I got you something too.
A sword? What a wonderful gift.
And when Leo is in his emo era and nothing his family does can get him out of his angsty funk, Splinter specifically invites Usagi to visit their dimension to try and help him out. Leo Usagi is just a cute ship more than anything. I don't have any specific headcanons on whether they're gay or bi or what, I just think they're boyfriends. Sometimes I'll see people point to them calling each other brother as a reason to not ship them because they see each other as brothers. But really that term is used in a brother in arms sense. I mean, Warren Stone calls Hypno his brother and those two are canonically a couple. And generally speaking, I only ever take brother or sister at face value when used very intentionally in the family context. Those terms are very often used in communities to recognize others that are part of that community, like in religions, racial minorities, and even the LGBTQ+ community. Here their brotherhood is as warriors, so yes, they can still kiss. My favorite turtle in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise is 2003 Michelangelo, and I headcanon him as some flavor of genderqueer. I played with different ways to look at Mikey's identity, from trans femme to gender fluid, but honestly, I don't think he would have a label. To me, Mikey's whole vibe is just doing whatever he feels like in the moment, and because of that, his gender is just kind of whatever, not something he really thinks about.
I'm not worried about silly things like labels. People can call me whatever they like. They can even call me Dookie.
Never call me Dookie!
The reason I have this headcanon in the first place is several moments in which Mikey wears feminine clothing, uses more feminine terminology to describe himself, and is otherwise just very comfortable expressing himself in a less masculine way.
I can see the family resemblance. I'm the pretty one. I can't wear this. I can't! What? It should fit just fine.
These colors clash with my headband. It's a fashion nightmare.
You couldn't possibly hit a lady. But you know, a lady could hit you!
Don't hate me because I'm beautiful. Beauty and dexterity win again!
You're the best bridesmaid ever.
Bridesmaid? Give a turtle a little respect! I'm the maid of honor.
These moments are all meant to be lighthearted fun, with Mikey just goofing around. But with Mikey being such a lighthearted guy, he would be silly and goofy when it comes to his gender expression anyway. Again, I don't see any particular label for my Mikey headcanon because I really don't think he would go for a label himself, but I'll sometimes refer to him more generically as genderqueer or transgender, since those are more umbrella terms that encompass a lot of identities. The last few queer headcanons I have for the 2003 series are kind of random and vibe-based. Like, to me, Casey and April read as bisexual, and there is literally no reason for that other than their vibes. I don't usually headcanon things solely based on vibes because I like to have direct support from the canon, but I don't know, they just seem like a couple of bisexuals to me. And the other vibes headcanon is the toxic yaoi trio of Hun, Baxter Stockman, and Agent Bishop. I kind of see Stockman's relationships with each of them as coded like toxic abusive relationships, where they're terrible for each other but also obligated to one another in some way. Kind of like Malachite from Steven Universe. Bishop and Stockman in particular I feel like have some additional vibes between them, particularly in Fast Forward, where Bishop is redeemed and is now the president of Earth. Fast Forward's a strange season. The episode Head of State ends with the two of them reuniting in a very affectionate way that we had not seen from their relationship prior. Also, the way Stockman asks about the vice president sounds very much like, is there a Mrs. Bishop?
Say, is there a vice president?
Of all of my queer headcanons, the toxic yaoi trio is the one I am definitely the least married to, but I did want to at least call them out, because the vibes are definitely there for me. Moving on to the 2012 series, I don't actually have that many queer headcanons. Bebop and Rocksteady are a really enjoyable pairing for me, as I already talked about with the semi-canon queer characters, but there's actually another pairing from the 2012 series that I almost included in that section as well. In season 4 of 2012's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, we are introduced to Karai's friend from Japan, Shinigami, a witch that can turn into a cat. Although for some reason they decided Michelangelo needed another love interest and made him start flirting with Shinigami immediately, Shinny never returned those feelings and was just mildly amused by him. Shinny and Karai are extremely close, they are very physically affectionate and clearly have so much love for one another. Peter DeChico, one of the writers for the 2012 series, has expressed support for the ship, referring to Shinigami as Karai's girlfriend in one tweet and sharing a fanfic synopsis in which Splinter and Shredder fight over who gets to walk Karai down the aisle when she marries Shinigami. I was trying to find the original tweets so I could link them, but DeChico privated his account, so I was only able to find one via the Wayback Machine, and another courtesy of the mutual I've mentioned on this channel several times, Fabulous. Shout out to her Tumblr for coming in clutch. I almost included Shinrai in the semi-canon category because of those tweets. However, I don't believe one writer's opinion on a ship holds enough weight to reasonably consider them semi-canon, especially because I pushed Warren and Hypno out of the canon category on the basis of them not being confirmed in the show, despite the Instagram post that made them canon coming from one of the series creators. The 2012 series itself really doesn't have anything to imply that Shinny and Karai are anything more than friends. It's just a dynamic that reads to me and a lot of others as very easily romantic. However, I still think it's really fun that Shinrai is a ship that has direct support from someone who worked on the show, and they're lesbians in my heart. The last queer headcanons I have for the 2012 animated series are April, Donnie, and Casey. The first piece of fan art I made for the 2012 series was actually of Capritello. I know there's some debate as to whether polyamory is considered queer, since someone can be cis-het and polyamorous. I've personally always seen poly as falling under queer because it's an unconventional relationship structure that is very often stigmatized like other LGBTQ+ identities, but I also get why it's considered as something entirely separate, so I don't know, I don't really have a strong stance either way as to whether poly falls under LGBTQ+. In any case, Capritello is queer regardless because of Jonatello. I love me some rivals to lovers, and Donnie and Casey are rivals in this series. There's a lot of bickering and fighting between these two, mostly because of April, which I've mentioned in several other videos brings out the worst in all three characters. However, when Casey and Donnie get along, it is an absolute delight. Race with the Demon is one of my favorite episodes because we get to see them hanging out in such a fun way. When it comes to April, I briefly entertained the idea of her being with Casey before I realized how much I hate 2012 Casey and April together. They always felt so forced to me and like there wasn't any genuine chemistry between them. And Casey in particular put more energy into beefing with Donnie than actually trying to forge a relationship with April. And as much much as the way Capritello was handled is a hot mess, I still enjoy the ship and think they could have been adorable had they been written better. Because I enjoy Capritello and Donatello fairly equally, and Donnie is probably the biggest romantic across all of the turtles in the franchise, I ship Capritello specifically where Donnie dates both April and Casey, but the two of them don't date each other. In canon, the way the three of them interact is kind of a disaster, but they're still my favorite ship in the 2012 series because I see so much potential with them. I don't have a specific headcanon for April, but I see Donnie as bi and Casey as gay and deeply in denial. I have an additional headcanon for 2012 Casey, specifically that he's gender fluid. This is literally because of one moment that is disgusting when taken as intended, and made so much less gross when viewed from a trans point of view. In Season 2, Episode 21, Plan 10, Casey and April accidentally swap bodies, and Casey spends the entire time he's in April's body checking himself out, complaining when they get swapped back.
Oh man, I kinda like being a girl.
The intention here is obviously that he liked being a girl because he could check out a girl's body completely unrestricted, which I think is such a gross joke to make, but the power of headcanon is taking that statement at face value, and Casey swapping bodies with April made him realize he might enjoy being a girl from time to time, and thus gender fluid Casey was born. Even with this headcanon, that scene is still gross because he is touching April's body in a way that she is not comfortable with, but the motivation being a gender thing and not an assault thing makes it slightly less terrible. This is actually the second trans headcanon in the 2012 series that exists to retcon a questionable writing choice. A lot of people see 2012 Leonardo as a trans girl because they reinterpret his really weird crush on his sister as gender envy instead. I don't personally headcanon this, but I do still think it's a fun headcanon and retcons my least favorite thing about 2012 Leo, so I still enjoy it to some extent and I have drawn fan art of it in the past. Moving on to Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I thoroughly enjoy the ships between April, Sunita, and Casey. Sunita is an original character to Rise of the TMNT, a yokai that attends April's school while disguised with a cloaking brooch. They hit it off immediately, and Sunita's entire introductory episode, Operation Normal, is all about Donnie and Leo trying to secretly help April have a normal day and make a normal friend. By the end of the episode, each of them learn the other's secret, April's being her relationship with the turtles and involvement with fighting the Foot, and Sunita, of course, being a yokai on the run from the Foot. April and Sunita each having this big secret from the other before realizing that they're hiding something similar feels kind of coded like hiding queerness before realizing they're a safe person to be open around. They have a really sweet friendship that I could easily see moving past platonic, which is why the ship exists, and April specifically I also headcanon as having a crush on Taylor Martin from earlier in the season, the popular girl April is desperately trying to impress in the episode Hypno Part 2. I think it adds an extra layer to her desperation to fit in beyond just wanting to be seen as cool that makes the episode more enjoyable for me. When it comes to April and Casey, it's largely just pairing them together because Capril is a recurring ship in the franchise, and she obviously can't be paired with the other Rise Casey because he's from the future, and he knew April as decades older than she is now, which would be really weird and gross. I generally don't enjoy Capril for the sake of Capril, when there are versions of it in this franchise that do not work for me, and they feel like they're paired together for that reason. However, Rise, April, and Casey are intentionally shown to be very similar, particularly in the episode Always Be Brownies, and I think they would have a really fun dynamic together. I also think it's hilarious that the ship name between April, Sunita, and Casey together is Capri Sun. That's so fun and silly. This is another one where I don't necessarily have specific identity headcanons other than April giving me lesbian energy. Some of the most popular queer headcanons in the TMNT franchise pertain to Rise Leonardo, who many, including myself, see as gay and trans mask. The trans headcanon is based on a few very minor details from the movie. While male red-eared sliders tend to have their eye markings fade as they mature, female sliders' markings get darker and more prominent. And so the fact that future Leo still has those prominent markings gave way to the headcanon of him being a trans man. The two indents on his plastron are also vaguely reminiscent of top surgery scars, which is just a little extra fuel to the fire of the headcanon. Leo being seen as gay has a bit more going for it than a couple of small details like the trans headcanon. The first and honestly most relevant one is Usagi, but Usagi doesn't exist in Rise of the TMNT, you would be correct. However, the animated series Samurai Rabbit: The Usagi Chronicles follows Miyamoto Usagi's descendant Yuichi Usagi, whose personality is very similar to Rise Leo's.
I bet we look so cool right now. Oh man, someone get a picture, come on!
This, paired with the existing popularity of Leo Usagi in the 2003 series, led many to start shipping Rise Leo with Samurai Rabbit Usagi, or an otherwise original version of Usagi for the Rise universe based on either Samurai Rabbit Usagi or 2003 Usagi. The only reason I ended up watching Samurai Rabbit in the first place was because of this version of Leo Usagi, which is sometimes distinguished as Leoichi for clarity. I'm a big fan of Rise Leo Usagi in whatever form it takes, and you rarely see Rise Leo shipped with anyone else despite Usagi Usagi simply not existing in the Rise universe. But when it comes to what actually happens in Rise, the gay Leo headcanon is primarily based on the episode The Hidden City Job. Brothers Senor Hueso and Capitan Piel are Rise original characters, and with them literally being named Mr. Bone and Captain Skin in Spanish, it's revealed that when they come together as Skin and Bones, they form an impossibly and irresistibly handsome man called Don Suave.
Wow, you guys are handsome.
So handsome that his charms can be used to fight off enemies around him. Leo bears witness to Don Suave, bows reverently at his feet, and affectionately rubs his face against him as they fly away. A lot of fans saw this as specifically hinting towards Leo being queer, but when asked about its intentionality in a Twitter Q&A, writer Ron Corsillo responded saying, "A lot of people noticed that in the episode with Don Suave. I keep in mind that he's supposed to be so handsome that anyone would fall for him. Otherwise, we didn't really get into romance, but you can feel free to use your imagination." In a different Q&A, he also specifies that Don Suave's powers affect anyone regardless of their gender or orientation. So Leo's attraction to Don Suave doesn't necessarily mean he's attracted to men. However, this episode still very much resonates with that headcanon, and Corsillo specifically saying feel free to use your imagination, and Don Suave's power of attraction is at least part of what's going on with Leo, shows at least casual support of the headcanon even if not outright confirmation of it. Also, I never noticed this, but in the episode Leo apparently checks out a guy walking by in the Hidden City, so do with that what you will. Another big reason for the gay Leo headcanon is his general flamboyance, which can be a slippery slope because it is very stereotypical. The idea that all gay men are flamboyant or flamboyance is indicative of being gay is a harmful stereotype, and I think it's important to generally steer queer of headcanons based solely on that. However, there's also the history of queer coding, where stereotypically gay demeanors were kind of the only way to have anything resembling gay representation for a long time, and very often a character being claimed as gay because of their demeanor is by queer individuals themselves. In Rise Leo's case, his flamboyance isn't the only thing fueling the headcanon, it's just an extra aspect of his characterization associated with that headcanon. I do still think it is very important to be mindful of the stereotype when it comes to Rise Leo and characters like him because it can be harmful. The last Rise headcanon of mine is pure and utter projection, that being Donatello as biromantic asexual because I'm biromantic asexual. I find Donatello to be extremely relatable across the franchise, and while I think I am the most similar to Batman vs. Donatello, Rise Donnie got me into the franchise in part because of how much I immediately connected to him. I don't tend to headcanon minors as asexual because unlike other orientations, you can't just focus on the romantic aspect of it. When it comes to a lack of sexual attraction, you kind of have to think about a character's relationship with sexual attraction, and that feels really gross to me when that character is a minor. The only situations in which I will headcanon a minor character as ace are when I'm bundling asexuality with being aromantic like I do with 1987 Donatello, since it's just a way of saying there is no interest in any type of relationship here, and Rise Donnie's case in which I am just projecting my own identity onto a character I like without any further thought of those implications. I also just tend to label characters heavily associated with the color purple as ace because it is the asexual color and also my favorite color. In all honesty, this biromantic asexual headcanon might be a blanket headcanon for all Donatellos, since I find him so relatable across the franchise, minus 1987 Donatello because I see him as aro ace like I've said before. I think Rise Donatello in particular is a very popular aromantic headcanon, but I don't see it at all, especially because of his clear fictional crush on Atomic Glass, and I ship him so strongly with Kendra from the Purple Dragons. But I do have one more aro ace headcanon to end on, that being Michelangelo across the franchise. Mikey gives me such strong aromantic energy, he's an absolute goofball that has no desire nor need for romance. However, this franchise apparently hates me specifically because Michelangelo has the most love interests of any of the Ninja Turtles, having multiple love interests in a few versions like the 1987 and 2012 shows. Thankfully, not all hope is lost because there are several versions of Michelangelo with no love interest. 2003, 2007, Rise, Batman vs. and Mutant Mayhem Mikey are all love interest free, so I can happily keep my aro ace headcanon for them. I also think 1990 Mikey falls under this category because Mitsu is not a definitive love interest. Mikey having a crush on her is headcanon or vaguely implied at best in my opinion, but I'm sure people will disagree with me on that because my closest TMNT friend vehemently does. You may have noticed basically all of my queer TMNT headcanons come from the shows as opposed to the movies or comics. The only TMNT comics I've read at length are The Last Ronin and the IDW continuity, and I don't have any particular headcanons for those iterations. Maybe once I finally read Archie and the rest of Mirage, something will come up, but for now it's just the canonically queer characters like Jennika. Nothing really stands out for any of the movies either, which is probably because the series leaves more room for seeing interesting character dynamics and interactions that could lead to a headcanon as opposed to what can fit in a film or film series. You also may have noticed I have queer headcanons for all of the main turtles except Raphael. I know some people enjoy queer headcanons for Raph, but to me he is definitively cisgender and heterosexual in every version of TMNT. I rarely go out of my way to headcanon straight characters, largely because they are already so represented by media that there's no need to call out a character as straight. But I don't know, Raphael does not give me queerness even a little bit. He would absolutely be an aggressively supportive ally, but that's it. Because I don't want to end a video celebrating queerness on a straight headcanon, please enjoy all of the canon LGBTQ+ identities I've determined for My Ninja Turtles AU TMNT Genesis. Leonardo is trans femme, maybe bi, I haven't really decided. I do want to introduce Usagi as a love interest for them, but I haven't fully hammered out what that's gonna look like. Donatello is just biromantic asexual for the same reason as every other Donatello, pure projection on my part. Michelangelo is aro ace. I almost made him pan, which is why the stickers on his plastron are the colors of the pan flag, but I didn't have any specific love interest in mind for him, and I realized that I could finally make aro ace Mikey canon, so I had to seize that opportunity. April is a lesbian, she gets with Irma. Irma is sapphic, I'm not particularly married to any identity for her. Casey is non-binary and bisexual. Shredder is gay, which actually plays into his arc quite a bit. If you're interested in hearing about that, you can check out my Genesis Shredder video. In my notes, I just wrote Krang as Shredder sexual, because I'm pretty sure the way I'm gonna write the Utrom is that their species reproduces asexually, and so Krang having feelings for someone is kind of already out of the norm. Vernon and Burne are both gay. I don't remember if I've mentioned them before, but they're pretty minor characters that just happen to be in the journalism club with April and Irma. Vernon is April's cousin, and Burne is part of the football team. I wanted to turn the weird tension I see them having in the 1987 series into something super wholesome and sweet. Honestly, they're kind of Heartstopper coded if Charlie was obnoxious like Vernon. The last one I have for Genesis I kind of forgot about, and that's Baron, Draxum, Fugitoid, and Torben Zix. These are just from early notes on my ideas of what to do with them, but the general idea was that Draxum and Fugitoid are together, and Torben Zix is, and I quote, Baron Draxum's wanted criminal ex who shows up in the Hidden City one day and Barry is like, WTF. So do with that what you will, I guess. That does it for this video. What are some of your favorite queer headcanons for TMNT characters? I've been meaning to make this video for a while and thought to myself, what better time to make it than during Pride Month? The next TMNT video will be the next character ranking, so make sure to check out the rankings I've done so far and subscribe to catch the next one when it comes out. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like and hype if you did. Thank you so much for watching and happy Pride Month.